I have lived past 64 years, but I already know I cannot carry this weight much longer. Age did not make it lighter. Time did not wash it away. It only taught me how to hide it better. My hands grew older, my hair turned gray. My grandchildren learned to run into my arms without fear. And still there was a night inside me that never ended. I told myself for decades that silence was punishment enough. It was not. Silence only gave the memories more room to grow. You did not know any of this because I could never accept what I had become. It was hard enough to wake up every day with it buried inside me. I never forgave my actions. Not for 1 hour, not for 1 minute. I learned how to sit at a dinner table and look like a man. I learned how to laugh when others laughed. I learned how to hold a glass without letting my hand shake too much. But forgiveness never came. Not from God, not from the dead, and never from myself. If I am finally writing this now, it is because I no longer have the strength to pretend that the life I built erased the life I destroyed. When I was a younger man, somewhere between 28 and 34, I believed friendship was something ordinary. I thought it meant sharing a meal, exchanging a few jokes, helping each other through difficult days. I did not understand what true brotherhood was until the front taught it to me in the cruelest way possible. War strips people down to their bones. It tears away manners, titles, pride, and all the polite lies men tell each other in peacetime. Out there, a man becomes simple. He becomes hunger, fear, exhaustion, instinct, memory. And if he is lucky, he becomes loyal to the few souls standing beside him. In that darkness, that is where I found the only real friends of my life. There were 7 of us in the unit, and over time we stopped feeling like separate men. We moved together, slept close enough to hear each other breathe, ate from the same supplies, cursed the same commanders, watched the same distant fires at night, and carried the same silent understanding that any one of us could be gone before dawn. We knew each other's habits without speaking. We knew who muttered in his sleep, who stared too long at old photographs, who lied in his letters home and said he was fine. The closest one to me was a man named Aiton. He had a way of smiling that made him seem untouched by the place, as if some clean part of the world had somehow survived inside him. He was not childish, not naive, just alive in a way the rest of us had already started to lose. He spoke about the future as if it were a real country waiting for us. He talked about fixing engines after the war, about buying a little piece of land, about sitting outside his own house in the evening, with no sound around him, but wind and insects. Sometimes he spoke about a woman he loved. Sometimes he spoke about children he wanted one day. When he did, I would listen and let him speak for both of us, because I had stopped imagining the future clearly, and he still could. We all depended on each other, but Aiton and I were bound by something deeper. We were the ones who stayed awake, talking in whispers after the others had gone silent. We were the ones who traded cigarettes, even when both of us had little left. We were the ones who could look at each other during shelling and understand exactly what the other man was thinking, without a word. If I am honest, he felt less like a friend, and more like the brother life forgot to give me. And that is what makes the truth even uglier. Because on the night everything ended, I was on guard. I was supposed to be awake. I was supposed to be watching the dark edges beyond our position, listening for movement, catching the warning signs before they became death. Men trusted me that night. They rested because I was meant to keep watch. But exhaustion is a patient enemy. It does not rush. It leans on your spine, fills your eyes with sand, makes every second longer than the last. I had already gone too many nights with too little sleep. My head kept dropping. I told myself I would stand, walk, wash my face, do anything to stay alert. I told myself I only needed to close my eyes for a heartbeat. I do not know how long I slept. Maybe minutes, maybe less. Long enough. I woke to the world tearing open. The first blast threw dirt, heat, and metal through the air so violently that for a second I thought the sky itself had collapsed. Then came shouting, gunfire, another explosion somewhere to my left, and the kind of screaming that never leaves a man after he hears it once. I remember trying to rise, then the pain in my leg hitting so hard it turned everything white. Something had torn through me, below the thigh. I fell and tasted dust in my mouth. The attack had already begun. Whatever I should have seen, whatever I should have heard, whatever I should have prevented, I had missed it all because I had closed my eyes, like a fool, like a coward, like a man who failed the only duty that mattered. Even now, after all these years, that truth is the knife that twists deepest. If I had stayed awake, maybe I would have raised the alarm. Maybe the others would have had time. Maybe they would have grabbed their weapons sooner, taken cover, fought back in formation, lived long enough to see morning. Maybe not all of them. Maybe not even most of them. But maybe one. Maybe two. Maybe 8. Instead, they woke into chaos because I slept. I still hear that thought in my skull some nights, with more clarity than my own name. You were sleeping while your brothers were dying. I dragged myself across the ground because the body keeps moving, even when the soul wants to stop. Fire flashed in broken bursts around me, turning shadows into monsters, and men into pieces of motion, and blood. The air smelled like burned metal, dust, fuel, and something worse that I understood only later. I called their names, one after another, but my voice sounded small inside the noise. There is a moment in every disaster when the mind refuses to accept what the eyes are seeing. It keeps insisting there must be another explanation. That is what happened to me as I found the first body, then the second, then another. All men I had laughed with. All men whose letters I had seen, all men who had trusted me to keep watch. Then I found Aitan. He was still alive when I reached him, though life was already leaving in front of me. His body was broken in a way I had never seen up close before that night. He was trying to breathe, but every breath sounded wrong, wet and desperate, as if his own chest were turning against him. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. His eyes searched the darkness until they found me, and when they did, I felt something inside me collapse, because even then, even in that state, he looked relieved not to be alone. I grabbed his hand and told him to stay with me. I do not know why we say such things to the dying. Perhaps because language is helpless and lies are all it has left. His fingers tightened around mine with surprising strength. He tried to speak. I leaned closer. I could not make out all the words. Maybe there were no full words, only pain and breath trying to become sound. But I heard enough to know he was still reaching for life, even as it was slipping away. There was fear in his face, yes, but worse than fear was the confusion, as if some part of him still could not understand how a man can be speaking one evening about the future and then be reduced to gasping under a ruined sky a few hours later. I stayed with him while his body trembled. I stayed while his eyes lost focus and returned and lost it again. I stayed when his grip began to weaken, and I stayed for the final moment, the one no man should ever be asked to witness for someone he loves, when the fight inside him stopped. When it ended, the battlefield did not become quiet. The firing did not stop for my grief. The flames did not bow their heads. The night kept moving exactly as before, and that felt like an insult beyond words. How could the world still exist when he did not? I do not remember screaming, but later one of the medics told me I had been shouting like an animal when they found me. They pulled me away from him. They treated the wound in my leg. They said I was lucky. Lucky. There are words so cruel they should never be used again. From that night forward, luck became another name for punishment. Because I had survived where better men had not. Because I had failed them before they died. Because the last hand Aitan held in this world belonged to the man who should have saved him. The official version of what happened was simple. There had been an attack. Our position had been overwhelmed. Casualties were severe. I was one of the few left alive. Reports were filed. Names were entered into documents. Families were notified. Medals and phrases and solemn faces did what they always do after war chews through a group of men. But the official version did not include the truth. It did not include my sleep. It did not include the weight of those lost minutes. It did not include the way guilt changes shape inside the body until it becomes rage. For the first days after the attack, I felt nothing clean enough to call grief. Grief belongs to human beings. What I felt was filthier. It was guilt mixed with humiliation, pain, sleeplessness, and a hatred so wide that it had no clear target. I hated the enemy. I hated the officers. I hated the land. I hated the sky for being above us that night. And beneath all of that, deepest of all, I hated myself. That hatred needed somewhere to go. And when a man is weak, wounded in the soul, and stripped of conscience by war, hatred begins looking for innocent places to land. I want to be careful with these words, because I will not decorate evil or make it sound noble. There was nothing noble in what came next. There was no justice in it, no revenge, no excuse worth speaking aloud. There was only a broken man choosing to become worse. A few days after the attack, I crossed a threshold from which I never truly returned. I entered a home that should have remained untouched by me. A family was inside. What I did there stained everything that came after. I terrorized people who had no power over the deaths of my friends. I inflicted cruelty on human beings who did not know our names, did not fire the shells that fell on us, did not place me on guard, did not close my eyes for me. They were simply there, defenseless, and I let the worst thing in me take command. By the time I walked out of that place, more than one life had been destroyed. I have carried that house inside me ever since. When I returned from the front, people looked at me and saw survival. They saw a man who had come back standing, even if he limped a little, even if his eyes had changed. They shook my hand harder than before. They spoke to me with that careful respect reserved for men who have seen things. Some called me brave, some called me fortunate, some lowered their voices when they asked about the others, as if softness could make death easier to describe. I learned very quickly that the world prefers a clean story. A soldier goes to war. He suffers. He loses friends. He comes home damaged but honorable. He tries to rebuild. People admire him for enduring what they never had to see. That is the version they wanted. So that is the version I gave them. I did not tell them that a part of me had been buried with Aitan and the others. I did not tell them that something rotten had taken its place. I did not tell them that when I closed my eyes, I no longer saw only the battlefield. I saw that house too. I saw terror in faces that should never have had to look at me. I saw the proof that grief can curdle into evil inside a man who stops resisting it. You did not know any of this because I could never accept what I had become. It was hard enough to keep breathing with it locked inside me. I never forgave my actions. Not once. Not in the daytime. Not in the hours before dawn. Not even during the rare moments when I laughed and almost forgot the shape of my own guilt. I carried it into every room I entered. I carried it into my marriage, into fatherhood, into old age, and still I said nothing. I married a good woman, better than I deserved. She had a patient face and the kind of kindness that does not announce itself. She believed silence was just another form of pain, the kind that fades if you stand beside it long enough. She never knew how wrong she was about me. She thought I came home wounded by war. She did not understand that I had also brought war home inside me. We had children then, years later, grandchildren. That should have saved me. People speak as if love can wash away anything. They say a man can be redeemed by building a family, by working hard, by staying, by trying, by being useful. I used to want that to be true. I used to sit at the table and watch my children laugh over something small and foolish and think, perhaps this is how punishment ends. Perhaps if I give them enough, protect them enough, provide enough, the scale will shift by 1 grain. But love does not erase blood. It only makes memory more unbearable. The first time I held my son when he was still a baby, I nearly dropped him because my hands began shaking so badly. My wife thought I was emotional. She smiled through tears and put her hand over mine. I let her believe that. I let her believe I was overwhelmed by joy. The truth was uglier. I was looking at innocence and thinking of what I had destroyed. That became the pattern of my life. Every good moment opened the door to something vile in my memory. My daughter taking her first steps, a school play, a scraped knee, my grandson falling asleep against my chest, my granddaughter laughing with her front teeth missing. Any sign of trust from a child felt like an accusation. Every time one of them reached for me, some voice deep inside answered, "These hands are not worthy to be touched without fear." So I drank. At first, it was just enough to sleep. A glass, then two, then more on the nights when the dreams came too quickly. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was medicine. I told myself all soldiers come back with something broken, and that men find their own ways to survive it. But alcohol is not mercy. It does not remove pain. It merely dulls it long enough to make you depend on the dullness. Then it leaves you weaker when the memories return, and they always return. I became skilled at hiding it. I learned to drink before others noticed my silence becoming too sharp. I learned how much water to add to make it look less than it was. I learned how to stand, how to speak, how to smile just enough. My wife knew I drank too much, of course. Families always know more than we think. But she thought the bottle was my war. She did not know the bottle was also my trial, my confession, my cowardice, and the only wall I had between myself and a mind that kept replaying the same night in different forms. Sometimes the battlefield came first. Sometimes I was back on guard, fighting sleep, promising myself I would not fail them. I would jolt awake before the attack, heart pounding, certain for a moment that I had been given another chance. Then reality would come crashing in. No, not another chance. Only another memory. Other nights I saw Oitan, not always dying. That would have been simpler. Sometimes I saw him as he had been a few hours before it happened, smiling in the dark, talking about engines and open land, and a future so ordinary it felt holy. Those dreams were worse. In them, he was still alive, which meant I had to lose him all over again. And then there was the house. I will not write more about that place than I already have. Some acts do not become cleaner because they are explained. Evil remains evil even when it is wrapped in trauma, fear, rage, exhaustion, or guilt. I know what modern people like to say. They like causes. They like language. They like to put words around horror and imagine they have understood it. But understanding is not absolution. A wound in me may explain the direction of my fall. It does not change the fact that I chose to step over the edge. That is why I never sought comfort in excuses. Not once. I never said to myself, "You were broken." I never said, "War made you do it." I never said, "Others were worse." I never said, "You suffered too." No. I knew the truth. A man can suffer and still remain responsible for what he does with that suffering. I knew that, and knowing it made it impossible to stand fully inside my own life ever again. My children grew older. Then they left home. Then they returned with children of their own. Years passed the way years do, when a man is not really living them, only enduring them. I worked. I fixed things around the house. I attended holidays. I smiled in photographs. There are albums somewhere that make me look like a complete human being. A father with his arm around his son. A husband beside his wife. A grandfather holding a child near a birthday cake. If anyone studies those pictures closely, they may notice my eyes never quite belong to the moment. That is because I was always elsewhere, at a table where I did not deserve to sit, on a battlefield where I should have stayed awake, in a home where I crossed the line beyond which a soul does not return unchanged. As I grew older, the distance between the past and the present should have widened. That is what people believe about time. They imagine memory fading, like old fabric left in the sun. Perhaps for ordinary sorrows that is true. But some things do not fade. They sharpen, especially when the body begins to weaken. When I was younger, I could drown certain nights with work, noise, routine, and drink. Age took those weapons from me one by one. My body tired faster. My sleep became thin and easily broken. My hands shook even before the first glass. Faces of the dead came more often and stayed longer. The things I had buried most violently rose nearest the surface when I had the least strength to push them back down. And then the grandchildren became old enough to ask questions. Not the real questions. Children do not begin there. They ask simple things at first. Were you ever scared? Did you have a best friend? Did you miss home? Did you save anyone? Did someone save you? Those questions cut deeper than any accusation from an adult could have. Because children still believe answers have shape and honesty has reward. They do not yet understand that some truths poison the mouth that speaks them. I would look at their faces and feel two opposite urges tearing at me. One was to lie, to preserve whatever goodness they imagined in me. The other was to tell everything, to spill the filth across the floor and let the whole family see what had been sitting among them for decades, every Christmas, every birthday, every ordinary Sunday meal. I did neither. I told them the safest parts, that war is terrible, that you lose people, that friendship matters, that fear stays with you. Those things are true, but truth is dangerous when it arrives in pieces, because people mistake fragments for the whole. My wife aged beside me with more grace than I deserved to witness. The lines on her face deepened, her movements slowed, yet even in her tiredness, she tried to reach me. There were evenings when she would sit quietly near me, not asking for anything, not forcing conversation, just offering presence. I believe now that she sensed, in some dim and painful way, that there was a locked room inside me she could never enter. She was right. I never let her. How could I? What words would I have used? What husband sits across from the woman who trusted him with her life and says, "The man you loved died long ago, and what remained has been performing decency ever since"? What father gathers his grown children and tells them, "Everything you admired in me was built on concealment"? What grandfather says to a child, "Do not climb into my lap with that trust, because I have done things no child should forgive"? So I kept silent. and silence became another kind of bottle. Not one you drink from, but one you live inside until the air runs out. The worst nights came near the end. I would wake before dawn with the feeling that someone was in the room. Sometimes I even spoke aloud before I understood where I was. Once my wife found me standing in the kitchen with tears on my face and a glass already in my hand, though the sky outside was still black. She asked what I had seen. I told her it was the same as always. That was the closest I ever came to confession while alive in any meaningful sense. The same as always. Dead friends, a hand going cold in mine, the price of sleep, the shape of evil wearing my face. I began, in those years, to understand something I had resisted all my life. I was not afraid of dying. I had been near death too often for that. What I feared was continuing to sit among the innocent while carrying proof of the opposite inside me, continuing to watch children trust me, continuing to wake each day and perform another version of a man who should have told the truth long before age made the truth uglier. Some men end their lives because they believe nothing matters. I am ending mine because too much matters. What I did mattered. What I failed to do mattered. The people I loved mattered. The people I destroyed mattered. And the longer I remained silent, the more I turned all of them into accomplices to a lie they never agreed to carry. So I have written this at last. Not because I expect mercy. Not because I hope to be understood. Not because one note placed beside an old body can balance anything. It cannot. When you find me, there will likely be the smell of alcohol in the room. That is fitting. It has sat beside me for years more faithfully than peace ever did. Near me you will find the weapon. That too is fitting. So much of my life was shaped by weapons, by failing to stop them, by using them, by surviving them. And beside all of it, this note, the only honest thing I have left to give. If you are reading this, then the silence in this room has already become permanent. I imagine how it must look now. The chair pushed back, the table still holding the glass, the smell of alcohol lingering in the air, the way it has lingered around me for years, the pistol somewhere near my hand. And this paper, folded once, perhaps twice, waiting for someone braver than I was to open it. I am sorry that whoever finds me will have to see me like this, but I was never strong enough to leave in a way that caused no pain. I was never strong enough for many things. I want my family to know something before anything else. None of this was ever your fault. Not my wife's fault, who stood beside a man she believed she understood. Not my children's fault, who trusted me because that is what children do. And not my grandchildren's fault, who ran toward me with open arms, without knowing that the past was still sitting inside my bones like a sickness that never healed. You gave me more love than I deserved. You gave me reasons to stay. For many years, those reasons were stronger than the darkness. When I held my children for the first time, I told myself that perhaps life had given me a chance to do something good after everything I had done wrong. When my grandchildren were born and their tiny hands wrapped around my finger, I told myself that maybe the future could still grow from a broken man. I tried. I truly did. But some things do not disappear simply because you build something beautiful on top of them. They remain underneath, waiting, breathing quietly, like a fire buried under ash. The war never left me. Not the night of the attack, not the moment I woke to explosions knowing I had failed the watch that might have saved my friends, not the sight of Aitan struggling for breath while the world burned around us. I can still feel his hand in mine even now, even as I write this. Sometimes I think the last warmth I ever truly felt left my life when his fingers finally loosened. I should have died there with them. That thought has followed me for decades. Every morning I woke up after that felt like borrowed time from men who deserved it more. Men who had futures waiting for them. Men who had plans, families, laughter that should have continued long after that night ended. Instead, I lived. And I used that life badly. There is another truth I cannot soften. After the attack, after the grief and the rage twisted together inside me, I crossed a line no decent man should ever cross. I harmed innocent people. I destroyed lives that had nothing to do with my suffering. I have never spoken those details aloud because I could not bear the sound of them leaving my mouth. But silence does not erase guilt. It only hides it long enough for it to grow stronger. That is why you never knew. Not because I believed I deserved forgiveness, but because I knew I did not. I could not accept the idea of living with that truth in the open. I could barely survive with it buried inside me. Every day was already a negotiation with memories that refused to loosen their grip. You did not know about this because I never allowed myself to be the man who confessed it. I lived instead as the man who pretended to be healed, pretended to be strong, pretended to be worthy of the love around him. But every time I looked at my children, I thought of innocence destroyed. Every time I held my grandchildren, I thought of trust betrayed. Every quiet evening in our home reminded me of another home I had turned into a place of terror. The bottle became my only way to quiet the noise. I told myself it was just to sleep, then just to calm the nerves, then just to stop the dreams. But alcohol does not forgive you. It only slows the mind long enough to survive another night. When morning comes, everything is still there. The dead do not disappear because you drink. They wait. They wait in the corners of memory, patient as shadows. And as I grew older, they came closer. Sometimes I would wake before dawn and feel as if someone was standing beside the bed, not in fear, but in recognition, as if the past had finally grown tired of waiting politely and had stepped forward to collect what it had been owed all along. Maybe this is cowardice. Maybe it is justice. Maybe it is simply the final act of a man who never found a way to forgive himself. I know that my family will suffer because of this decision, and that knowledge hurts more than anything else I have written here. If there had been another way to live honestly, without destroying the people who loved me, I would have taken it. But every year that passed made the distance between the man you believed I was and the man I knew myself to be wider and more unbearable. I cannot continue carrying both. To my wife, you gave your life to a man who never deserved such loyalty. You saw goodness in me when there was very little left to see. If there is any peace waiting for me after this world, it will come partly from knowing that at least for some years, I managed to be a husband who did not fail you completely. To my children, the best parts of me live in you. Whatever strength you saw in your father, keep it. Whatever weakness you now discover in this letter, leave it with me. To my grandchildren, I hope you remember the man who held your hands, who told you stories, who watched you run through the yard and laughed like nothing in the world mattered more. That version of me was real too, even if he was only a fragment of the whole. And to Aitan, if there is any place where the dead can hear the living, I am sorry. I am sorry I slept when I should have watched. I am sorry I lived when you did not. I am sorry for everything that followed. The bottle beside me is almost empty now. The room is quiet. My hands are steady for the first time in a long while, perhaps because writing these words has finally loosened the knot I carried for so long. When this letter ends, my story will end as well. There will be no more nights where I wake to explosions. No more dreams where I hold a dying friend. No more mornings where I look into the eyes of children and feel unworthy of their trust. Only silence, and perhaps somewhere far beyond this life, the faint hope that the men I lost that night are standing together again in a place where war cannot follow them. If such a place exists, maybe they will see me coming. And maybe, just maybe, they will understand why it took me so long to face them. Goodbye.